Hi, this is Alan Gassman. I am here with Chris Rowe.
Hi, Alan. Good morning.
Hey, how are you?
Good.
Excellent. So this is part 4 of Chris's wonderful series on wealth planning strategies with math and beyond. Chris is a very accomplished financial advisor. He started his life in a big 8 CPA firm back when there were 8 big CPA firms. And he has dedicated his career not only to understanding and being able to explain important concepts, but also managing them beautifully. So we'll talk more about Chris when we get a couple of things out of the way. Today's presentation, if you are a Florida lawyer, you get continuing education credit. If you're a Florida CPA, you get continuing education credit. Otherwise, I'm not sure what the rules of your jurisdiction are. If you want a certificate of attendance, we'll be glad to give that to you. But this is, we're not on CPA Academy for this presentation. If you have a question, please make sure it's an easy one, and then you can go to the question panel and click on the inverted pyramid, sing the King Tut song by Steve Martin, and then type in your question. If it's an easy one, I'll answer it. If it's a difficult one, Chris will answer it. Later on in the weekend, we will post this webinar to our YouTube website. You can also always search YouTube Gassman, and you'll either get The Nude Bomb, which was a Get Smart movie that Vittorio Gassman appeared in, or you'll get our webinar series, but there's no nudity on our webinar series website. Today's presentation is brought to you by EstateView Software, which is absolutely free until April 1st. So all you have to do is and you might want to do this now while you're working with us, put in your browser, that's the thing at the top of your screen, the word EstateView, ESTATEVIEW.link, and then it'll come up and you'll click on that blue login button that you see. If you needed an email address, you can put in test@test.com like you see on my screen. And if you needed a password, you can use the word test. And EstateView is web-based. The EstateView calculator goes to your computer and works on your computer or your iPad, powered by the cloud. But the cloud does not get the information that you provide. It's really interesting how all of this works. So Chris, we're going to now do the most difficult part of the webinar. We're going to change the presenter. I'm going to have to push 3 buttons and not mess it up. And I think I've done it. I think you're now the presenter. We're going to see Chris's screen. There it is. Beautiful. And take it away, Chris.
Okay. Well, thank you, Alan. Today, as we continue to move forward in our presentation, I wanted to sort of set up what I'm going to do today. And there was an interesting study that just came out in 2023, and it was about the amount of U.S. high net worth and ultra high net worth taxpayers, or sorry, people in the country. And so the people in the U.S. who have more than $5 million of net worth represent about 1.8. And the people who have $20 million of net worth represent about 0.2%. And they control about 19% of the net worth. So when you think about estate taxes, and the current exemption is, call it $29 million right now, you're talking about probably under 0.2% of the United States that would be subject to estate tax. Okay. 2026 scheduled to go in half. Who knows what Congress is going to do? Let's assume they'll do nothing. Now you have roughly 1.8% of America who is subject to estate tax. Still, when we talk about a lot of these estate tax and planning techniques, really we're focused on the 1.8 or 2% of America and some other people who are rising through the ranks, mostly through their businesses appreciating rapidly. But today I wanted to focus on a different segment because 98% of the United States fall between 0 and 5 million. And you have about 15% of those people who are at 5 million to 5, or sorry, at 500,000 to 5 million. So what I wanted to do today was focus on a client who had about a $6 million net worth. And I think we, as a financial advisor, I work with some really wealthy people who have estate problems. But when you look at this, when you look at these numbers, right, most of our clients are going to fall in the, call it $2 to $20 million range. So what do you do with those small clients? And in practice, as a financial advisor, not as an attorney, the first thing I normally do when I'm working with clients is I always sort of counsel them to make sure they have an updated estate plan. And when we talk about estate plans and that level, what I'm talking is the basics, the powers of attorney, the wills, revocable trust, those types of things. Because you really don't need to do any planning, right? You don't need to do estate planning to avoid federal estate tax because they don't generally have a problem. So what I've found out over time is that leads clients to say, okay, well, let's do nothing. Right? Clients love to do nothing. That's their favorite strategy. If we could, Alan, if you could add that to the software, that would be excellent, right? The do nothing strategy.
Oh, the do nothing button. Perfect.
The do nothing button. That would be an excellent idea to add to the software. But so most clients go, well, hey, look, if I do nothing, what's the difference? When I die, my spouse gets everything, and then my kids get everything, et cetera. Well, I think two or three things that you have to consider. Number one, while you're not subject to federal estate tax, in certain states you are subject to a state inheritance tax. For instance, I sit in PA, and PA has an inheritance tax on pretty much everything that you give. You give to your spouse, it's 0. You give to your children, it's 4.5%. And you give to your other relatives, it's 15. So if you end up passing away, you and your spouse, with a $6 million estate, and you give it to your children, I mean, they have a $300,000 plus bill, that they have to pay. So, and that could have simply been avoided without any, what I call, skin off your back. You would have not missed your retirement. You would have not had to cut back on spending. You could have done some simple techniques and, had your kids get 300,000 more. So what I wanted to do was kind of walk through that scenario today. And I wanted to use the State View software to show how myself as a financial advisor and not an attorney kind of talks to a client about this. And of course, as an advisor, I work a lot with attorneys and accountants, and one of the goals I think of working with a client, at least from my perspective, is to make sure that we have a great team in place. And that team means working with people like Alan and CPAs and myself. I think when you have a team in place that you could bounce ideas off of, we get better end results for our clients. So what I wanted to do is say, I want to start with a scenario and just click a married client. Very, very simple, client, straightforward, not much complexity. They own a $800,000 residence, have $6 million of assets that they have as investments, business and, taxable investments. You can see if we kind of run down here, we'll just start, it's very simple to enter things into the software. You just kind of go line by line. You got husband, how much do they save until they retire? In this case, I'm assuming they're making about, 400,000 or 500,000 a year from the business. They have a pretty modest lifestyle. They pay their taxes. They save 150. They're going to retire in about 10 years when they're 70. And then all of a sudden it's going to flip over and they're going to start spending 150 a year on an inflation adjusted basis. Wife, year younger, again, she's going to pass, or sorry, she's going to spend 150 also in retirement as a couple. Okay. And then we go down and we enter in, what's the tax rates, what's the inflation, what's their assets? Well, they have $6 million. You punch it in there. What do I think it's going to grow to? I'm sticking in an investment advisor cost and or investment cost, tax rates every year on those investments. They have some property. We have a growth rate, okay, on the property. So now you look at this particular client, and this is, look, if they die at the end of 1 year, right? So both of them die. You come over here. You got many different scenarios we could do. So what happens if they die in 1 year? They pass $7 million to their heirs. Okay, great. Did no planning, died in 1 year, passed 7 million, minus 4.5% in PA inheritance tax. So no planning. The kids have to pay about 300,000 in tax. So what if we said, okay, look, what happens if we wait 30 years, right? Chances are this couple, I have them set to pass in 30 years. So now all of a sudden we click to scenario 2 and we say, okay, what happens if they wait for 30 years? Well, in 30 years, they put 150,000 in, they spend 300,000, inflation adjusted over 30 years, husband passes, obviously no federal estate tax, he's still under 14 million, we'll assume the exemption is higher. 16 million goes off to the kids, or, you got about 800,000 of PA inheritance tax. So again, no planning, don't worry about the federal tax, but the kids get 6.2 minus about 700,000. So the lack of planning over 30 years has cost the client roughly $700,000, right? I don't know about you, Alan, but I sometimes hear from clients, well, it didn't really cost me anything, I'm dead, right? And I like the control that I have with respect to my assets, because usually if I give them away, I don't have control of them. And hey, what if I need them in the future? So that's a very important point. I think one of the most common themes I hear is, it's great, Chris, you want to do these things, but what if I need the money? What if I need it? I'm not 100% comfortable in giving money away and not having it if I need it. I spent my whole life to have this financial freedom, and now you're telling me to sort of give my money away. So let's talk about some other scenarios we could illustrate. As we walk down here, one of the other areas I'm going to illustrate is gifting, right? So let's assume that the client makes a gift. They have 2 children. So we say, look, right now you could give 38,000 to each child. Why don't we set up a trust for spouse? Right? Set up a trust for spouse and children, and we'll just put the 38,000 in. In other words, all we're really doing is moving money from left pocket to right pocket into a trust. Now, so long as A, they're not divorced, and B, the spouse doesn't predecease husband, we'll assume husband is the one making the gift. Assuming wife does not predecease husband, husband has access to the money through wife for life. Now, probably outside the scope of this discussion, but there are some things that can be done in order to protect the spouse or the husband in the future to maybe have access to the money. Alan, I don't know if you want to bring that up or talk maybe 1 or 2 bullet points on, when you get the question, hey, look, if I'm putting up a trust for my spouse, what if I need that? How can I help myself?
Right. So that falls under the category of what we like to call the spousal limited access trust. So if I want to gift $18,000 for each of my children, I could gift $36,000 to a trust that my wife, Marcia, is the trustee of. She could take what she needs for health, education, maintenance, and support. On her death, she can direct how it goes to our descendants if they are respectful to her, and it's never subject to estate tax. So we might do one slat, one spouse does a trust for the other spouse, which works the same way. And then the other spouse, Marcia, may set up an irrevocable trust for the children because she doesn't like me anyway. She doesn't want me as a beneficiary of that trust. So And then, Chris, do you think I'm reluctant to do what they call a reciprocal slat, where I do a trust for Marcia and our children, Marcia does a trust for me and our children, because of how the gift tax laws are, or because of how the creditor laws work.
Right.
But maybe in Pennsylvania, that's a safer bet if you're only trying to avoid state estate tax, right?
Well, that's that's a question I had, and I thought about that and go, well, obviously the courts and the IRS view reciprocal trust as, you know, a nothing. It's includable in your estate. But I'm not sure how PA looks at that. And if you're trying to just avoid PA inheritance tax, maybe that works. Now, PA is not a self-settled trust state. So if they deem those reciprocal trusts to be self-settled, obviously, without, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I would assume that a creditor in PA could pierce that. Maybe that's not an issue if you decide to set it up outside of PA. From a trust income tax standpoint, PA views any trust set up by a PA resident and making contributions to that trust as a PA trust for tax purposes. So if I set up a Nevada trust, a Delaware trust, a South Dakota trust, PA still views that as a PA taxable trust. So we're not getting out of the income tax on the trust, but there may be an opportunity there to create some type of a self-settled trust if the client was worried while avoiding the inheritance tax. Now, a lot of people think in PA, some clients will be like, okay, well, what if I create a trust for my spouse and kids upon my first death? So as we know, nothing happens when I die and I leave everything to my wife. So why not just create the trust then? Well, the rule in PA is if you create a trust solely for spouse, then the spouse will pay the tax on second death. If you create a trust for spouse and kids, it's your choice. You can delay the tax till second death, or you can elect to pay the tax on first death. So again, I think from trying to avoid the state inheritance tax, if you're going to create a trust for your spouse and kids upon your death, why not do it during your life? And then you get that out of the PA tax system.
Right. So I'm sure some people probably said, what's a reciprocal trust? What's the issue? Well, if I set up a trust for Marcia, she sets up a trust for me. Isn't it just like I set up a trust for me and she set up a trust for her? If you set up a trust for yourself, the IRS says you got to pay a state tax on it. So
Right.
there was a US Supreme Court case called US v. Grace, Grace, where the court said, well, if they're not exactly reciprocal and there's a lot of differences between the two trusts, we're not going to impose a state tax. But what the US Supreme Court didn't realize is that under the law of the common law, if I set up a trust for Marcia and she sets up a trust for me and they're not very similar, my creditors can still get into the trust I set up that she set up for me and vice versa. And if the creditors can reach in, then it's subject to a state tax. So the US Supreme Court didn't realize that, but eventually somebody or thousands of taxpayers may get stung because of that decision. But if you
Right.
set up one of these things, if you set up reciprocal trusts in an asset protection jurisdiction like Nevada, Delaware, Alaska, then it might work. But you know what? If your clients are wealthy enough to do one trust for the kids and spouse and the other trust for the kids only, why worry? You could always maybe borrow from the trust,
Right.
or have the trust give the money to the kids and maybe they'll loan it back to dad. It's probably better to do these trusts than to not do them.
Right. Right. And I agree. And I think one of the things we just pointed out, Alan, in the example we went through, and again, speaking from a financial advisor standpoint who works closely with families, when we talked about setting up an estate, even for a client who has $6-7 million, and we talked about SLAT, spousal limited access trust, reciprocal trust, the point is there's a lot of issues, and these issues that families face. So if we make a decision to start making gifting and put a trust, and we talked about avoiding the PA inheritance tax, we talked about creditor protection. We'll talk about the income tax. Where do we set these trusts up? Are they subject to state income tax? Are they not? How PA taxes them. By the way, PA is one of the very few states who do not recognize grantor trust status. So if you set up a trust in Pennsylvania and sold a business interest to the trust in exchange for an installment note, mostly all practitioners go, well, if it's a grantor trust, it's not a taxable event for federal income tax. Well, that is true. But for Pennsylvania income tax, it is a taxable event. Now, Pennsylvania changed that rule coming, I think, 2025. They're going to start respecting the fact that if it's a grantor trust, it's a grantor trust. So that's a benefit. But my point of all of this was there are numerous issues to consider: estate tax, income tax, what state you put it in, jurisdictional issues, reciprocal trust issues, access, divorce. The point is, when you manage a family's wealth, okay, you can't view things in silos, because any decisions they make in one or multiple areas affect all the other areas. I think that's the real key point of working with families, is to understand the effects that any decisions have in one area and how on other areas, and being able to counsel those families to look through all those issues and make sure that you're covering your bases. So, and Alan, as you said this best, let's assume we figure out that we could do reciprocal trust, and you could do them in South Dakota, and maybe that works. But why do that? Why take the risk if the client has sufficient wealth to just pass some money? And I think there's a happy balance between a client's sort of, we'll call it wants and needs, right? Our inherent desire to have ultimate control, but being able to counsel the client to say, look, you're worth 10 or 15 million dollars. Being out $1 million or $2 million is not the end of the world here. To set up a trust. So as we keep going through the example, we talked about annual gifting. If you look from an annual gifting standpoint, the client just makes, let's say client and spouse makes annual gifts to their children, right? So all we really did was shift money from left to right. You get about $3.5 million into the trust. In 30 years, there's about $7 million in the trust. Same amount of money is passing the kids, right? We didn't do any income tax, estate tax planning, etc. The exact same amount of money goes to the beneficiaries, except they save about $400,000 because there's $7 million outside the PA tax system. Right? It's simple as that. And then we move forward. So let's say the client, the husband says, hey, wait a second, but I'm going to set up this trust for my wife. We talked about it. Let's keep it simple. And we simply explained to him, if she divorces you or dies first, you don't have access to the money. And yes, there are backdoor ways to get it. But let's just answer the client's question. Well, how do I make sure I have enough money to live on? So what if we just took some of the money in the trust and we bought some life insurance? And what's wonderful about the software is when you are when you go down here, there's a section called life insurance, and you can see I punched in life insurance on the spouse. We got 25 years to pay, $48,000 premium, $2 million death benefit, right? And so we set up this trust for husband, very different than a SLAT or the gifting trust, and we own life insurance in it. And then if the spouse happens to pass first, the husband gets an extra $2 million back, not back in his name, but it'll be in trust for his benefit, and he can use it. Now, the great thing about the software and doing planning is what I did was I said, okay, if I wanted to give an example of how much life insurance may cost on the wife, and I said, I need 2 million. So I clicked 2 million right here. And, lo and behold, it tells me, let's assume they're standard. I always illustrate it standard. I learned a hard lesson. When you tell people preferred, they get those numbers in their head. And then when they come back standard, they go, well, you said it was going to be 6 and not 10. So you always kind of quote the worst case scenario so the client can get their head around it. 2 million, 20-year term, 10,000. But in this case, we want permanent insurance, and we'll call it 48.5 right here. So it gives you a quick example. I punched in the 48.5 in premium, and I kind of run it out. That gives me an example. Now, in this particular case, we've actually not only kept some of this money outside the Pennsylvania inheritance tax system, we actually enhanced the client's wealth with the insurance slightly, right? And it's just because of really it's because I have her passing away in 20 years. So she's 59, so she passes away in the first death in 79. So she basically beats her life expectancy. And when you look at life insurance, and I think this is probably good for the people on this webinar today. If we learn one thing about life insurance can be complex. It's mostly sold, not bought. Most people get sold life insurance, they don't decide to purchase life insurance. But I look at life insurance in 2 ways. Number one, does the client have a need? What's the need? So there's generally 2 needs. The need is to cover something for a period of time. If they have a defined period of time, they need to cover a need, a liability, a buy-sell agreement, kids in college, etc. That's term insurance, very simple. If they have a need if they have a coverage need that will go until their death, that's uncertain. You have to buy permanent insurance, okay? But when you look at permanent insurance, there's all this fanciness. And I think what people do and how people are sold life insurance is that they try to achieve multiple objectives with one thing, right? And Alan, you've had a long career, right? Does one trust achieve every objective of the family?
No.
No, it just doesn't. So one life insurance policy is not going to fund your retirement. It's not going to give you death benefit for 20 years while your kids go to college. And it's not going to provide to mitigate any inheritance or buy-sell agreements. Right? That's what is sold. Hey, look at this policy. You could get the death benefit you need for the next 20 years while your kids are growing up. And if you predecease your wife, she'll have 2, 3, 4 million. Oh, look, you'll have a savings plan because this asset will grow. And then in the future, you could borrow tax-free for your retirement. And oh, by the way, if you don't do all that, and even when you die, there'll be money left over. It just doesn't work that way. Right? Those are too many objectives for one product. And guess what? 9 chances out of 10, one or multiple of those objectives will not be met. The client will be disappointed. When you place life insurance for families, design the life insurance to meet the key objective. If my objective is I need a death benefit in the future, buy for death benefit. If the objective is I want tax deferred growth on this policy and I want to grow assets in the policy, well, don't also try to cover the guy's death benefit needs. It's not going to work. But in this particular case, the reason you actually enhance the value is because simply this, the client died in only 20 years. And so the rate of return on the death benefit, i.e. how much did you get in death benefit for 2 million relative to what you put in, was roughly, call it 50,000 times 20 years. You put in $1 million and you got 2 million. So you basically doubled your money. If you look at the rate of return, you had your rate of return exceeded the annual growth rate of your other investments. That's why you enhanced your estate. So the way permanent life insurance works is very simple. It's a pension fund. For everybody on this thing, think about it as a pension fund. Okay? You tell the insurance company how much death benefit you want. If you're not buying a variable product, they determine kind of what their crediting rate is, like how much they're going to pay you, right? And then the life insurance company does underwriting. And they do underwriting because they need to figure out in the present value calculation or the payment calculation, they need to figure out the term. i.e. how long is this person expected to live? That's the term. So you tell them how much you want, they underwrite to say what the term is, and then they have their own crediting rate based on what their experience is investing in their portfolios of the insurance company. And they put them in together, and voila, you get your premium payment. And it's the same as how much money do I have to put in to my retirement account, so given a 5% interest rate, so I have 2 million when I am 60. They're the same calculation. There's no magic there. So life insurance really acts as a pension. But if you consider it that way, so when I look at life insurance for clients, I look at two things. One is, what's the need, and what is the product that achieves that need? Number two, what's the rate of return, right? What's the rate of return? I don't want to buy a permanent product if the rate of return's terrible, right? So it has to be a quality product that has a good rate of return. Now, again, you don't know the ultimate rate of return because you don't know when the client's going to die. But it should, life insurance, when you look at products, should roughly be in the, today, probably 4.5 to 5.5% rate of return to life expectancy of the client. That's kind of a standard thing. So, okay, we'll move on. But in this particular case, what I really did in planning for this client is I basically solved his need, and his need was, could I get some money back if my wife predeceases me? And the software allows you to do that. Now I'm going to switch over real quick, and I'm going to go to a different section. And this is the retirement calculator. And same client, same example. 6 million of assets, $800,000 home, annual investment return net of all fees and taxes 4%, inflation rate 3.5%. And again, what I did was I started with the first example, punched in the client's information. They're going to save $150,000 a year. At retirement, they're going to spend $150,000 a year right here. And the questions for the clients is, can we afford to do some of these strategies? And in this case is, look, you have almost 5.7 million of excess money when you retire. Then the next scenario is, if you spend 150,000 in your retirement and you contribute about $70,000 a year to gifting, okay, you still have enough money, 2.3 million. And then what I did was I did a third scenario and said, and you just keep adding scenarios. One of the things I could do a fourth, let's do a fourth, right? So I'm going to duplicate scenario 3, and I'm going to just punch in that instead of spending 272,000, the client spends $350. And you will see right there, it changes the scenario. So in real time, one of the things I do is sometimes I do like we're doing today. I just share the screen with the client. I get on a Zoom call with the client, I share the screen, and we could just run through easy scenarios by hitting duplicate. We could do as many as we want. And then, as you can see here, what I did was I said, oh, look, client, if you're making gifts to a trust, but yet you are overspending, maybe you spend more than 150, you think you spend 200 or 225, this gives the client some level of comfort, right? That, hey, look, you still have plenty enough money at retirement, right? And you'll see the number at retirement doesn't change. They all end up with the same money, but in the future, it's saying, is how much surplus does a client have based on what he's going to spend in retirement right here. And as you can see, the surplus goes down as his spending goes up, but still the client has sufficient money even after the gifting, because in the desired retirement income, I assume he gifted money away. That was part of his spending. So I really like this section of the software because, again, when we're working with clients have a tendency to they want to take shortcuts. They want easy answers. And they really, for most cases, when you're talking to them about an idea, they want to know about the idea. They want to know about the planning strategy. and how it benefits them. But they also want to know, and I think this is the bigger thing, it's not going to affect me, right? Like if I want to go buy a car, I can still buy a car, right? That's really what they're more concerned about. They love to save estate tax, they love to save inheritance tax, but they want to make sure that their lifestyle won't be affected by what they do to save taxes. And again, I think having worked with clients who, you know, have a few $100,000 all the way up to clients who are, you know, in the billions, of course, as you get up the food chain and you have more money, it's easier to make decisions, right? Move 100 million in a grat when you're worth $1 billion. Client's not too concerned that they're going to run out of funds, right? But the vast majority of America is 5 million and under, and really the vast majority is 20 million and under. So, you know, everyone on this call and most of us, we're working with clients at 20 million and under, and 20 million is a lot of money, but it's not if you're 60 years old and spending $1.5 million or 2 million a year. You know, you could go through it. So, and we all have those clients also, right, Alan?
We do.
And the great thing, you know, if we click through some of the software, right, we could see some charts and timelines. And look, these are just the various scenarios. Show this to the client. Look, scenario 1, you make some gifts. You know, scenario 2, you spend more, spend more, spend more. This is what happens to your end result of your estate over time. Now, again, what we're talking about here is their spending has been higher than normal, and but they're really the depletion of this estate is happening because we're making gifts, and we're getting it out of the tax system. Now, some other things to consider. I think when we look at small estates, we do some of the math. So we talked about gifting, we talked about spousal trust. I'd say one of the most important things for small estates, people who have, call it 15 million and under right now, because 2026 exemptions going to be 14, 15 million. Let's assume that. Not subject to federal estate tax. I think we got a plan for state inheritance tax. Number 2, the biggest thing is income tax. Income tax is a big thing. Giving money away during your lifetime to avoid the Pennsylvania inheritance tax of 4.5% may very well whack you if you give it in trust, you die, and the trust doesn't get a step up in basis. So, Alan, you want to talk a little bit about how you get around, you know, if you're putting assets in trust and you don't really have a federal estate tax, how would you plan for the potential step up in income tax?
Okay, well, the first thing that I would consider would be placing their assets in a joint exempt step-up trust, which is a special kind of joint trust that allows the first dying spouse to have the power to direct trust assets to creditors of the first dying spouse's estate. So Marcia and I could set up a joint exempt step-up trust. She could own 95%, I could own 5%. And if I die first, I have the power to direct up to 95% of the trust assets to creditors of my estate, but only with the permission of our next door neighbors, who would never give me that permission. Right. And under the Internal Revenue Code, if the trust is properly drafted, there can be a step up in income tax basis. An alternative would be to set up what's called a community property trust. As you know, Chris, if you live in a community property state like California, Arizona, Texas, community property all gets a step up on the first death. So right. Jonathan Blattmacher, one of the co-creators of EstateView, set up the idea of the community property trust. So that's another way to do it. And then the next thing I'll mention is that I have a wonderful 92-year-old father-in-law and a wonderful 97-year-old mother-in-law. So if I set up a spousal limited access trust for Marcia and our descendants and my mother-in-law and my father-in-law, and my mother-in-law and father-in-law have the power to appoint the trust assets to creditors of their estate with the permission of our next door neighbor, then on their death, we may get a step up in income tax basis. So all that is very important to taxpayers of all net worths, right?
Right, exactly. I think whether you have $100 million estate or a $5 million estate, those are excellent points, and really excellent to the smaller taxpayer who, for most taxpayers, right, the step up in basis is very important. It's really the main planning opportunity for most people under $5-10 million, right? And so giving that up means that you're paying this unnecessary tax, or your heirs are going to pay unnecessary tax in the future. It's not worth it. How else when you're planning? So Alan, when you're planning for small estates, what are some small estates being, people under the federal estate tax exemption? You mentioned a couple things about the joint exempt step up trust that you've developed, step up in basis. What are some of the other things you consider?
We always consider creditor protection, Chris, because throughout my career, I've had so many clients in car accidents or business issues. So we want to definitely, that's why I mentioned this joint trust. I might own 5%, Marcia might own 95%. No one likes me. They want to sue me. Everyone likes her, less likely to sue her. Another thing that we commonly do is Marcia and I could enter into an agreement, or that joint trust could say that, for example, if Marcia dies first, I have to keep 90% of our assets in trust just for me and the children. So if I remarry or get into a relationship, or even have an aggressive child or in-law someday, those assets stay in trust for the descendants. So those are important points that quite candidly often get missed.
Right. I think one of the things that don't get planned for a lot of times is second marriages. Like you said, if you get remarried, or one of the things we talked about on a previous series was what's the risk families face, and I put in-laws and outlaws, and that's a risk. You just mentioned it, right? Your children get married and get divorced. They have access to certain trusts that say give them the income or let them take a withdrawal at age 30. They could take all the money, and now all of a sudden they're in a divorce, and there's an issue regarding their trust. So I think both, like you said, creditor protection being I'm in a car accident, but I think you need to look at creditor protection from outlaws, in-laws, kids, all those people that are very important. What else do you consider in those small estates?
A lot of times we put the assets into a revocable trust to avoid probate, but we also have a provision that the client can't amend the trust unless they have the permission of 2 or 3 key people or advisors or a psychiatrist or neurologist, so that our elderly clients are less likely to be taken advantage of and lose the assets in their uh, revocable trust. It essentially becomes irrevocable to a certain degree, and that has
Right,
saved a lot of assets from being hijacked over
right.
the years.
And and I know I could probably imagine everyone on this trust or everyone on this call has been in situations, whether it be personal or clients, where multiple children and maybe multiple children at different wealth stratuses. One's pretty wealthy and successful, and the other may not be. And the one who doesn't have as much money wants to get more money from the parents, where the parents really just want to give things equally. So I think those are all really important things. Now, one of the last things I'll touch, and then I want to go to a different calculator, and show some of, as we have about 15 minutes, show some of the other calculators and how we do planning strategies for clients. But the last thing is, Alan, so you have clients who are, and this works for very wealthy clients or not so wealthy clients. How are you doing any planning around retirement accounts at death? Again, we had a lot of, outside the scope of this call, but a lot of legislation, Secure Act 2.0, when the stretch IRA is effectively dead. So how are you planning when clients are dying with IRAs, and they have you know, 4, 5, 6, 8 million of net worth, couple million in IRAs. Most of these are doctors or high earning professionals that made W-2s, and the only way to save tax was to fund money in an IRA, or I mean, into a retirement account. How are you doing some planning around that?
Well, the first thing is we just make sure the clients understand the numbers, that these IRAs are going to last a long time, gives them a sense of security. That RMD calculators on the far right-hand side.
Right.
Another thing we do is just make sure you get the 10-year stretch, because we typically have the IRA payable to the spouse for a rollover.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes we have a binding written agreement between the spouses, and it says, Alan's going to inherit Marcia's IRA, but he agrees to treat it like it's a trust and to only withdraw when he gets to be 70 and a half, and to only withdraw the minimum unless he has permission from the children or their close friend or a trust company. And he agrees to invest it like it's in a trust, and his children can sue him if he doesn't follow these rules. And if he remarries, he cannot make the IRA payable to the next spouse. So that can be a written agreement. Now, I don't know
Okay.
if what the IRS would say about that kind of agreement, but there's a little bit of risk, but a lot of reward for having that type of agreement. Sometimes, Chris, we're using the teapot trust, where the IRA goes to a trust for all the children, along with a separate trust for all the children. And then every year, the trustee decides how much to give to each child, giving less of the IRA money to the high income bracket children and more of the other money. So, because
Interesting.
it doesn't make sense to leave a third of your IRA to your high bracket child and a third of
Right.
your IRA to the low bracket child. It's better to give the high bracket child the non-IRA money and kind of make up for it.
Right.
So we see that happening as well. And then if you're going to leave money to charity, leave the IRA partly to charity, because the charity won't have to pay income tax on the IRA.
Right.
So that's what comes to mind offhand.
Well, have you considered, and I kind of did so you leave your IRA to a crot, right? And effectively a 20-year crot upon death, and your children can get a payout.
That's
And
a
they get a
great
right, they get a payout over 20 years. So effectively you've taken and you've stretched it another 20 years. And this is really just a follow-up from what you just said, Alan, right? Leaving some money to charity. So client has a charitable desire. Obviously, if you take the client's IRA or retirement account and leave it to charity up front, there's no tax. But the client says, hey, I have a charitable desire. I'd like to leave some money. Maybe you leave some money up front and you say, look, what if you have $1 million? So we got kind of go through a calculator and say, what if we do a term crot at 20%, or sorry, for 20 years? We put in $1 million. We assume this is going to be their IRA that they're going to contribute. And we do a maximum payout rate, which means we're going to max out how much the kids are going to get every year. And, you know, you'll have a small charitable remainder value. So effectively, you're giving $1 million and the kids are going to get roughly 900 of that million over time, spreading out the tax. Again, you know, if you leave $1 million to a higher taxpayer child, right, they're just going to pay more money. Maybe you, by spreading it out, I mean, let's be realistic. Most people who pass away with huge retirement accounts are probably in their 80s and 90s, and their kids are 50s and 60s, right? So those kids might be in their prime earning years, but if you spread this out over 20 years, the kids go from prime earning years to retirement years, and they're getting money and not paying a 40% or a 37% tax. Maybe they're now paying 25% tax. So again, I think the purpose of today's webinar was really to talk about people who simply don't have a federal estate tax problems, but there's still a lot of opportunities to save income taxes and plan for people's estate. And I think this is a prime one. And what's really good is obviously we could duplicate. You know, what if you could set up a crut for each one of the kids? What if some you want have higher payouts, maybe some have lower payouts, et cetera, and you manage that for the benefit of income tax brackets. those were other options that we could do. Moving along, one of the main, what we'll call it, one of the main strategies a lot of us do, and a lot of our clients who are in the 5, 10, 15 million range have businesses. And one of the things that we could look at is, what if we make an installment sale? And now again, let's say that we're going to just sell, the client has 7 million, right? They spend 200,000, kind of sticking with our example, 7% growth rate, okay? And they basically will make $100,000 gift to a trust, and then they're going to sell their business worth 2 million. Okay. I'm going to kick this down. Let's just forget it. We're not going to, the client doesn't have a state problem. We don't necessarily, we don't need to necessarily have a discount rate. So if you look at this, the client says, well, why would I give up income? Well, you don't. They have a note, and they're going to get back 2 million plus the interest rate on the note. And so each year they're going to get back part of their note payment, and so they could use that money to spend. And basically, we're just leaving the value of the business and the appreciation outside of their estate. Again, not for federal tax, but for other things. One of the key things, and I've heard this numerous, that clients worry about is, in order to have this transaction not federal income taxable, and in certain states not state income taxable, is the trust must be a grantor trust. But in order for, because it's a grantor trust, the client is responsible for paying the income tax. So basically, if we think about it, the trust becomes a tax exempt entity. It doesn't pay any tax. The grantor needs to pay it. So Alan, when the grantors pay, one of the biggest concerns I hear from the grantors, great, I have to pay the tax. Well, what happens if the assets outside the trust get low, i.e. I spend too much? I buy myself a nice Porsche 911 when I've always wanted in retirement, and I get a new girlfriend. So, and I end up, buying a big house, and now all of a sudden I'm paying tax on assets earning for my kids. What are some of the things that mitigate that burn? Sorry, the term is, we refer to it as the burn, i.e. how much is your estate going down because it's burning from paying the income tax? So Alan, what would you do in addressing that client's issue?
Well, first I'd want to see a picture of his girlfriend, but after that,
and depending on if it's necessary or not, right?
Right. Right. We're talk him out. Please talk him out of that girlfriend. But anyway,
that's a bigger burn. That'll be a bigger burn. No offense to anyone on the call.
Right. So you can toggle off grantor trust status if the trust is well designed, or there may be trust protectors who can toggle off grantor trust status. Let that trust pay its own darn taxes. Or he could sell assets to that trust in exchange for a self-canceling installment note at a high interest rate,
right,
or in exchange for a private annuity, which would have a very high payment. So those are three of the ways that it could work. And the fourth way it could work is, a lot of times, I think most of the irrevocable trusts that we form now for large gifts are in Nevada or one of the other asset protection jurisdiction states, and the trust protectors can add the grantor as a beneficiary if his net worth ever goes down precipitously. So there are all those ways, but you are absolutely right. You've got to warn the client about the burn and be able to handle the potential consequences.
Right. And again, I think when we discuss the burn, going back to some clients we work with who are hundreds of millions of dollars, that might not be as prevalent to them, but of course it could very well be too, right? There's never been I don't think there's any common link between net worth and how much you really spend. Some people, I've seen some people that had, hundreds of millions of net worth, but they also spent 5, 8, 10 million a year. So, you know, and if you look out over 20 or 30 years, spending 7, 8, 10% of your wealth, it's going to dissipate. Right? And when they start doing some estate tax planning and putting money in trust for their kids, you know, that burn could come back and hurt them in the future. So you have to really plan for that.
Chris,
Go ahead.
have you seen our large gift calculator? What I might do at the end of the hour is show the large gift calculator, because we set that up to have an am I running out of assets analysis.
Good. Why don't I'll change presenters and let you show that right now.
Okay. This is the hard part of the talk. Getting the
There we go. I think we could do it.
baton coming over. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let me figure out how to get rid of my PowerPoint. Now I'm going to go ahead and open up estateview.link. I just put in estaeview.link, and it comes right up. And I'm going to go to the large gift calculator now. I want to make sure I'm sharing screen. Can everybody see that? Audience view. Yep, you're seeing my screen.
Yes, sir.
Now, one thing, Chris, I just want to point out to everybody, when you first open any of these calculators, if you want to start brand new, you click on File New, and this is the default calculator, and it's always on simple mode. So you're always inputting on the left, and then on the right, across the top, you always have in blue your inputs, and then in green or yellow your results. And then for all of these, you can click duplicate and have 2 or 3 of them going. And then if you just change one thing on each of them, that will change across. And then you can darken the cells if you want to say, well, this is different than that, so the result is different. But on the large gift calculator, I'll go back to just one of these, and I'll put it into the more complicated mode. So what I did there was I went to this Swift plan thing on the left, and let me go ahead there and get my cursor colored. All right, so you see my red ball. So when you first open it, it's simple. When you click on standard, click OK. Now it's showing the same scenario, but with a little bit more things that I can add. Now I can add prior gifts, etc. So the inputs I have now is this person has 2.5 million. He's a widower or a widow with a Porsche and a girlfriend, and then make a $1 million gift. And let's see what he's 70 years old. He's got a 15.4 year life expectancy. We're going to kill him off at 85. He's spending $200,000 a year more than his income. He's got a portability allowance of $2.5 million. Let's give him a $500,000 or $750,000 home. Let's say he's got 20 million of investments growing at 7%. And I'll click on advanced mode. There's a lot of other things you can do, but mainly he wants to know what happens if I make a $1 million gift. Well, if you make a $1 million gift, your estate tax savings will be $783,000. And if you live to 100, your assets will be $67 million. And now we have another feature, which is the ability to show a spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet shows that when he gives the million, his portability allowance goes from 2.5 million to 1.5 million, and it calculates what the estate tax savings is based upon every year that he might die. To go back to your theme, let's go ahead and have him be a more moderate individual. and put the net worth down to 10 million, and then make the gift 3 million. Now he may run out of assets at age 100, and we're showing him in the spreadsheet the savings per million of amount gifted. But let's make him even more moderate. Now he's a $9 million person. He wants to give 3 million away. Well, now he's going to run out of assets at that age that you're seeing there.
All right.
Sorry, I had to turn Alexa off. She was reminding me to do something. So what I can do, Chris, is I can go to timelines and charts, and I'm showing now a timeline of this scenario. And the blue is what he gave away. That orange is his house, and the green are his assets. So the more he gives away, if he gives away 4 million, he's going to be okay. If he gives away 3 million, he's fine. If he gives away 6 million, he's going to run out of assets at age 80. But this assumes that he's going to pay the income tax for the trust, and that's the burn, that you're never going to toggle off grantor trust status. But here I can say, well, if I toggle off grantor trust status and the trust pays its own tax, beginning in year 7, that's where the crossover will be. So I think when you look at this, you can see that this helps out. And then if I want to do another one and make it a different gift, make it a 4 million gift, and also make gifts every year for 2 children under a crummy power, that's gift number 2. So I can show gift number 2 there, and then I can show both gifts. The first alternative, gift number 1 is green. Second alternative, gift number 2 is blue. So I don't think I did a great job of explaining it, but that's certainly a way that for a moderate person, you can show them what the situation is. And then here you can show them before gifting, I was going to have a $302,000 estate tax and $1.5 million going to my beneficiaries. Now I've got no estate tax and $7.3 million locked up in the trust that my next spouse can't touch.
Right. Well, I think these calculators are great. Number one, they save time, right? They save the practitioner, myself, time to illustrate these concepts. Trying to build a spreadsheet to illustrate them take forever if you're doing one-offs. Number two, you did a great presentation on that, and really it explained to the client very simple. How much can I give away? I understand your concept, Chris, Alan, great. Am I going to be broke? Right? How much can I give away? And you could sit there in real time and do a Zoom or meet, bring an iPad or a laptop to a meeting and say, look, give away $1 million, you'll be fine. 2 million, 3 million, 4 million. You see at 4 million, you start to get there. And sometimes clients go the other way and they don't want to give anything, and then they hear this idea of saving some taxes and they go, well, what if I give away 8 of my 10 million? You didn't want to give away 200,000 of your 10. Now we're at 8 to 10. So clients have a tendency to overshoot. And I think using these calculators and those easy to find charts, printing them out, showing the presentations, it really just will help set a framework to have the client make better decisions.
Thanks, Chris. Now the hour's up, so there's no more continuing education. But I just want to show the people who are on, if you don't mind, Chris. And Chris, you can stay on or sign off.
No,
but the people who are on, I want to just give you a little bit more information like I said, estate view is completely free until April 1st. Then it's going to be $199 a year for the simple version, or $500 a year for the expensive version that has all the options. But please use it. And I'm going to go back to the RMD calculator that Chris showed. So when I first open it, it's going to show me, as you can see, a person age 73. Let's go ahead and just move this down to age 68. And this is an opportunity for me to educate my client to say, you know, look, you got $3 million in this plan. You don't have to take anything out until you're 73. And then you're going to take these minimum distributions. Here's what they look like. And even in 20 years at age 86, there's going to be a lot of assets in this IRA. But what you might want to think about with respect to this is that you could be giving, well, first of all, you could defer the first payment. So you could click there, and that shows you deferring the first payment. And then the other thing is you could be starting to give this to charity. So your minimum distribution beginning in 2031, maybe you would like to give 25,000 of it to charity. Click on 25,000. There's, now you see with inflation, that'll be 34,000, and that your tax savings from that will be $12,000. So, you know, at least you can show them the numbers, and they may not want to wait until they get to 73 and have to take their first distribution. As you know, they could start making charitable distributions at 70 and a half. So you can click there and you can show them, even before you start taking your distributions, you could start doing charitable distributions. And then I also, just to show a few more features here, and I apologize that this is sounding like a commercial, but I guess it is. Across the top, you click Alter Summary Columns, and you can pick what you want to show across the top. So if you want to skinny it down, the yellow ones are the ones we normally use. So now it's skinnied down, it's less complicated for the client. And then on the spreadsheet, I can click Alter Summary Clients, and I can show more or fewer things across on the spreadsheet. Hit Close. Now you've got the spreadsheet, and now I could show every other line of the spreadsheet or every third line of the spreadsheet. If I go ahead and click on Duplicate here, I can show two different spreadsheets with two different scenarios, whatever the scenario difference is. Now I've got two spreadsheets. I can click on Export to Excel, and now the spreadsheet just became a Excel document that I can share with the client or customize further. And also I can click on Generate Explanation and show both of these as PowerPoints. That's not up and running yet, but it will be soon. Or if I want to share this with you, Chris, and I want to let you use this particular calculator for free, I click on Share with Client, and then it gives me a code 060164, generate URL, copy to clipboard. Now I can just go and start an email to you. Hi, Chris, here's your calculator, and
Excellent.
Here's your password, and then you can open the calculator and use it for up to 12 days.
Right.
That's the, so we talked about large gift, we talked about RMD.
How about valuation discounts? That is new.
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, let me just mention on the Nest that we showed everybody, I can get out of Swift mode into the more complicated one, and now I can show the mortgage, the wedding, the bar mitzvah, the inheritance, and there's a separate row, a separate column on the spreadsheet for everything this client may want to do. So you can say, don't do that because then it takes more out of your retirement. Okay, so now, yeah, I'll show you the valuation discount. This is our newest calculator, and this is what, when you first came on 15 minutes before the talk, this is what Kevin was showing me. So this is really to run numbers and to help educate people on how these discounts can work. So what I have here, and I'll just open this up, is I've got a LLC, and it's got $1.3 million of assets. It owes 300,000, so it has a net entity value of $1 million. I'm going to transfer 40%, so it's got a non-discounted value of 400,000. It is voting stock. It's 30% in cash, and we're going to take a 7% discount to the extent of cash for our lack of control discount. It's got 50% in stocks. We're going to take a 10% discount on the stocks. Then it's got 8% in bonds, take a 5% discount on the bonds. So it's the segregated valuation approach. So we're going to take a 7.5% lack of control discount, 25% lack of marketability discount, a tax affecting discount of 3%. So a total discount of 67%. So the value of the discount, 2.69. Now we're not trying to take and I'm not sure these numbers are right, we'll have to double check them, but we're not trying to take the job away of a valuation discount expert, but we just want to be able to show a client, here's how the discount works. And that securities discount's way too high. So I'm going to move that down to 22%. And now we're at a discount percentage of 70. So, but that's what this is for, just to give you shorthand, because we get these valuation reports in, and if I can have a paralegal get these numbers out of the valuation report and put it into this spreadsheet, I've got a better understanding of it. And then I could compare, well, what if I get more aggressive and I take a 30% marketability discount? But if you go over a certain amount, it says, wait a minute, too aggressive, and it turns red, or it's embarrassing. So that's that calculator. And then the valuation discount calculator for an active business, it says, here's your company, there's your EBITDA, there's your multiple of EBITDA, multiple of earnings. So that becomes your going concern value. You have $500,000 of assets more than you need in the company. So total value $1.9 million. Company owes 300,000. Total net value after debt $1.6 million. You're transferring 40%. Non-discounted 640,000. It's voting stock, but it's a minority. Take a 20% lack of control discount according to the valuation expert I hire. Take a lack of marketability discount of 25%. Takes a tax affecting discount, and it just tells me I've got a total 41% discount. The value transferred 372,000. So,
Alan, does this come into a spreadsheet that projects, say, EBITDA in multiples?
It doesn't yet, because it was just born today.
Okay.
After a few days work. But what I can do is I can click here, multiple of EBITDA. So as you see the EBITDA there going down, you see the value going down. So that's what it does now, but it will export into a calculator eventually.
Or a spreadsheet, okay.
It will export into a spreadsheet eventually, when you tell me what you want that spreadsheet to say.
Okay.
Now, the other thing, Chris, is for the smaller clients, the amortization calculator, almost all calculators tell you the payment amount if you put in the principal, the interest rate, and the number of payments.
Right.
This would allow you to say, if the client goes, well, how much can I loan my son-in-law? I'd like to know how much I can loan him. Well, The interest rate you could use would be the applicable federal rate or the prime rate. We can look that up. Let's say it's 4%. You want to be paid monthly. You want him to be able to repay it in 151 months. And how much can he afford? He can afford 82.49. Okay, the principal amount is 977,449. And there's your spreadsheet. So, you know, at least it makes it easier for clients to understand amortization, and now you don't have to go to a spreadsheet in order to do that.
So I'll make a joke here, right? So you go through that calculation with the client for the gift to his son-in-law, and then what's the answer? Don't do it. Right?
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Get a lien on his assets. That's the answer.
Right. Don't do it.
Get a prenuptial agreement. Let me mention, we've got a detailed instruction. We've got a detailed instruction manual there that is very, very detailed. We have a phenomenal law students at Georgetown LLM program, who's also a Purple Heart recipient, who's working on this instruction manual. So it's coming along well. And then on the married couples program that we showed, I'm not going to do it right now, but when you click on generate client letter and then you click on all scenarios, when you click that button, it prints out a really nice customized letter. And then finally, and I really enjoy this, you go to news here on the far right hand side, and it shows you your choice of 4 different news feeds, and it updates them every 30 minutes, and it summarizes them. So, you know, if you like to watch, if you happen to like to read Thomson Reuters news, this is all free, Yahoo Finance, or just the normal news, and then a ticker tape across the bottom. This is a faster way to see what's going on. And beginning April 1st, Chris, I hope you'll be the host for our Estate Feud daily chat on a couple of days. You can be our celebrity host.
Sure.
And then whenever anyone posts here, you will you'll get the post, and we can, you know, talk about anything we want to talk about.
That's awesome. I mean, I like to read the understanding gap rules as an accountant, right? When I can't sleep at night, the understanding gap rules really help.
Yeah, and that just came out on the 1st at 4:39 p.m. and you can see whatever happens to be going on, and you can just use Google News here, because I'd rather see 4 different news feeds at the same time than just the Google News. And then when you want to do it at night, Kevin's so good, the programmer. Oh, you want to do this at night and not wake up your spouse? Okay, there you go. So, you know, it's just amazing what computers are able to do these days.
That's good.
So
it's just efficiency, right? When you're working with recommendations to clients, and whatever that recommendation is, just creates efficiency.
Right.
And you know, and you can, because normally you know, in the old days, not the old days, but you come with a fixed presentation before you couldn't really carry your computers around and share screens and Zoom. You would come with a fixed presentation, and the client would ask questions. And then you would have to basically give them your assumptions and kind of talk in real time. And I found most clients can't follow stuff in real time. Right. You're talking numbers. This way you could bring your computer and show it in real time, and they see the effects when they have questions.
Yeah, and it works really well on an iPad because you can use your fingers to pinch things up and down.
Right.
And, you know, make them very large. But a lot of these calculators, we do have the working PowerPoints. So once you decide what you're going to show the client, you just click on the PowerPoint, and then you have a PowerPoint that both explains the strategy and also gives the exact numbers that and the spreadsheet that was used. So enough of the shameless self-promotion. Chris, I really appreciate not only your skill as a presenter and your dedication and knowledge as a wealth advisor. But also just the fact that you've picked up on Estate View and you've made so many great recommendations that are really appreciated. And the biggest criticism we get is from the older practitioners who say that it's too complicated. And that's why I have that simple mode. But what are your thoughts on that? And what can I do for the practitioners who say it's too complicated?
Well, I wouldn't say it's too complicated. It's just you have to use it, right? I mean, any kind. I spent a lot of time using financial planning software. Okay, and any financial planning software, these calculations are complex, and you got to put a lot of different figures in there. So I think in the end, you just have to spend time using it. I would argue uh, that Estate View is simpler, right? For instance, that the nest calculator, right? If I was to enter that into another software that I use, I'd have to put in a lot of stuff to get the same output. I could do a nest calculator in 5 minutes. I can't do that in other calculators. So yes, it at first it appears complicated because there's a lot of inputs, but as you know, working with clients for many years, there's a lot of inputs. There's a lot of scenarios. There's a lot of things that, what if the business is this? What if the growth rate is that? What if, my house grows? What if it doesn't grow? What if I make this gift? What if I don't make the gift? I I actually think it's simple, right? Could maybe inputs get simpler, right? Maybe they get a little more intuitive as over time as people use it and give feedback, but I don't find the software that complicated from an input standpoint. I've used some. I think you can use it for very specific things and accomplish it fairly quickly. Again, but at first it is a little overwhelming. So like anything else, it takes time and practice. As you can see, I still struggle a little bit when I have inputs and things of that nature because I use it, but I don't use it all the time. When you start using it on a daily basis and running through scenarios, you learn and it becomes simpler. That's, I guess, my takeaway, the end, wrapping up would be, you just got to use it. And
Yeah, and you just go one thing at a time down that left side
yeah,
and cover the bases. Because yeah, it'd be simpler if you didn't show that they were either having income come in or having expenses go out.
but it's not realistic.
It would be simpler if everyone dies in 10 years. It would.
Right.
But yeah, we're trying to cover all the bases, which is what a conscientious advisor should be doing.
Right. And when you do that, that brings in complexity, right? I had a client, a friend tell me one time, I don't like complexity. Okay. And we were talking about doing generation skipping trust, and we were showing these spreadsheets and second to die life insurance and a whole host of things, foundations, CROTS, every acronym known to man. I don't like complexity. I want to keep it simple. I said, well, then give me your hundreds of millions of dollars and you don't have to worry about it. Right? Like it's like anything else. As a person's life, as more net worth come and more scenarios happen, there's one thing about keeping it simple, but sometimes complexity just happens. You can't avoid it at that level. But I actually think as a software, it's pretty remarkably simple and straightforward. But I will say this, I believe that over time, as I continue to use it, every time I use it, I learn things. And I think your recommendation is spot on. With any software, you have to go one thing at a time. And then you have to spend time to see how, when you change one thing, how it affects what you're looking at. And then over time, you start to learn. When you try to go in and put all the scenarios in, you really don't know what's happening. So you kind of just be systematic. And what will happen is over time, 6-8 times you use it, you'll find that it's remarkable. I mean, I think what's really remarkable about the software, calculations are great. We could do those on spreadsheets. It does save time. But to me, the explanations, like the PowerPoints, you know how long it takes? I mean, think about it, like, and you know how long it takes. You built this thing, but like
Hours and hours,
when
days,
you want to do a CROT PowerPoint for a client, and you went on the internet and found a calculator, and then you want to show the charts and, hey, look, this is what happens here, and this is the payment you get. I mean, and the boxes never look right, and then you know, the spreadsheet crashes, and it takes hours, and then you want to write, you know, you write a letter. That letter is at least 3-4 hours. I mean, if you're starting from scratch, a letter's 3, 4, 5 hours, and that's when you know what you're writing. So right there, while maybe the inputs may be somewhat complex, right, and there may be some complexity on those inputs and all this various scenarios, you know, from a practitioner standpoint, man, just getting those letters, forget the actual numbers, just getting the showing what a CRUD is to the client, being able to hit print, it saves you hours and hours and hours of time. So I end with that.
I'm gonna say 2 or 3 things because you've got me fired up. This is great. You know, Einstein said, keep everything as simple as you can, but not too simple. So we've just tried to cover what normally happens for our clients. But when I was a younger lawyer, there's still a great lawyer named Bob Burke. He's been practicing in Palm Harbor, Florida for forever. And Bob would sit down with me with a client and let me be the technical advisor. And he would say to the client, for every complicated situation, there's a simple solution. And it's always the wrong solution. Complicated situations call for complicated solutions. And what Alan's come up with here will save you tens of millions of dollars of federal estate tax. So basically, suck it up and spend 3 to 5 hours to understand it, because it's going to really help your family. And I was just always so tickled the way he would say that. And I thank Bob Burke profusely for mentoring me in those years, along with many others.
Right. And that was my point, right? If you don't want complication, get rid of your wealth. But as your wealth grows and you have a complicated situation, and there's no way to avoid that. You can't keep it simple. Well, yeah. You can pay the tax.
Yeah, the other thing I'll say is, you know, we have a lot of law students here. We typically have 8 or 9 law students working here, and some of them have never taken a single tax course, undergraduate or law school. And I'll have them sit with me for maybe an hour or 2 hours and watch me show the software. And then they'll read the letters, and then they understand estate tax planning. And they understand the computer because they're born understanding computers. So if you're over 70 and you're having trouble with the computers, get your 14-year-old grandchild to join you, and they'll show you the computer, and you can show them how the tax system works. Everybody will be very happy.
I asked my daughter, she's 10. I walked out right before we started. I said, hey, you want to sit in and learn about estate planning and tax law? She goes, no, I'd rather learn how to build 12 and up Legos. That's what I'm doing.
Well,
so
that's great.
Maybe she's not a future tax lawyer. Not sure.
Yeah. Did you talk business and did you talk tax in front of your children?
Do I?
Do you?
Yeah. So my daughter's 10, and yeah, I do. And you know, I talk sort of investments and everything we deal with families. Of course, she looks at me cross-eyed. Can I get back to building my Legos, Daddy? Right? Like, but you know, like anything else, hopefully in 20 years it rubs off. Not that.
Oh yeah, because I wanted to mention this. And by the way, most of the viewers are on, so I guess they're not too bored with us yet. But when my son Brent and my daughter Nicole were like ages 4 through 9, I would take them every Sunday to Busch Gardens in Tampa, which is like an amusement park in Tampa.
Right.
And it was a 1-hour drive, and the whole way there and back, I would always dictate letters to clients. So 10 years later, Brent is 19, 20. He comes to the office to work for us. And he knows all this stuff. I mean, he's really knowledgeable in all this stuff. And I say, Brent, did you take a law course, or have you been reading about law? And he goes, no, I learned all this on the way to and from Busch Gardens when you were dictating all those letters.
Right.
So You know, I went and I spoke at Rollins College last week on charitable planning, and I said, I got my MBA here in 1968 when I was 8 years old, and my father got his MBA here. And he came, and at dinner every night, I heard about statistics, finance, debits, credits, management.
Right.
I said, I had my MBA at age 9. So, you know, those of you listening, if you have small children, talk it up and
Right.
please share the passion. What really bothers me is I'll sit down, it's often with doctors, and the first thing they say is, I told my children never to be a doctor because it all sucks. You know, I think
Yeah.
just talk it up because kids are ready to learn all this stuff. They don't know they're learning it. It's going into the subconscious mind, but it's going to come out later.
Well, I hear that from, I work with some doctors and they always say that. And well, this profession sucks. And I go, I told my kids not to do it. I go, well, but I don't know. Doctors live a pretty good life, not what they used to, right? Let's be realistic, right? They have a real income hit over the last 30 years. Doctors make a lot less today for a lot of reasons than they did. But I mean, does the law suck, Alan? Financial advisory suck? I mean, every business you're in. I have clients who are in businesses that don't relate to law, finance, or medicine. And they'll say it sucks while they make a lot of money. Well, everything sucks. Everything's difficult. Everything has hassles. If it's worth doing, it's going to have a hassle factor because if you want to achieve greatness, if you want to build a business, if you want to achieve a great profession, it can't be easy, so everyone's going to do it. It's very simple. So everything that we do has a suck factor, you know. So,
Yeah.
but you're right. I don't. I I listen to podcasts in the car with my daughter. Of course, she'll be like, "Can you turn that off? That is terrible." Yeah. Which kids are kids, right? They want to live what they live. But I think you're correct. When you did that, things happen by osmosis. It just happens. You don't know if they're interested, but if they get exposed to it, and now is your son a lawyer or no?
No, he's a financial analyst for a
Okay,
large bank and manages a team of people doing something that I don't understand.
good.
And teaches in an MBA program. So
That's awesome.
yeah, it is great. It is
That's
great.
awesome. Yeah.
All right, Chris. Well, I've got
Thank
to
you.
get to my next webinar. I want to thank everyone who attended this, and especially the 57 of you who have been here the last half hour. That's really nice. Let us know if you'd like to have a conversation with us sometime, or give us your questions, comments, and suggestions. And thanks for caring about what we do. It's a fantastic profession and a great time to be in these professions.
Thanks to everyone. Appreciate it. Thank you, Alan, again for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
Wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.